Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome to what I can honestly tell you is going to be a truly thrilling week. A full, remarkable collection of unexplained, mysterious, and deeply haunting stories is lined up for you every single night this week. And tonight, we are diving headfirst into something that has fascinated humanity for generations. Tonight, we begin with UFO and alien stories, real accounts, real people. Real experiences that have stayed with them for years, sometimes decades, and that they have never been able to fully explain away. But before we begin, I want to take a very special moment to wish the most wonderfully warm and heartfelt happy birthday to Christy T. Christy. Wherever you are tonight, I hope your day was filled with all the joy and love you deserve. Wishing you the absolute best. Now then, if you are watching this for the very first time, please take a moment right now to subscribe to the channel and join our little community here. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for every single one of these stories. Hit that bell so you never miss a new one. And now it is time. Get yourself comfortable. Maybe pull that blanket a little tighter, turn the lights down low, and let the darkness slowly take control. Our first story tonight takes us back to a summer in Tacoma. A summer that one person has never, not even for a single day, been able to forget. I want you to really picture this. I was 15 years old, almost 16, and that particular summer in Tacoma was absolutely suffocating with heat. The kind of heavy, pressing warmth that doesn't let up even when the sun goes down. My parents didn't have the luxury of air conditioning back then, and so our family's solution was simple: we would move outside. We would drag our sleeping bags and pillows into the backyard and camp out beneath the open sky, hoping that whatever breeze might drift through in the night would give us some relief. That night was like many others that summer. I was stretched out on the trampoline with my two cousins, Dan, who was 9 years old, and Chris, who was 14. The three of us had our little system worked out perfectly. We would sneak a few cans of Surge soda into our sleeping bags so nobody would notice. We would raid my dad's garden for snap peas and carrots to snack on. And then we would lie back, side by side, staring up at that enormous, beautiful, perfectly clear sky. And count shooting stars until our eyes grew too heavy to stay open anymore. My flashlight was tucked right beside me, nestled between me and Chris, just within reach. The sky above us was wide and open and absolutely glorious. The kind of sky you only get when there's no cloud cover, no haze, and the stars seem close enough to touch. We were laughing softly, whispering back and forth, trying our hardest to stay awake just a little longer. And then something changed. I don't know exactly what made me look up in that particular moment. Maybe it was some instinct, some deep animal sense that something was not right. But I looked up, and there it was. A massive shape was hovering directly above us. It wasn't moving. It made absolutely no sound. It was oval in form, perhaps slightly flattened, with what appeared to be a concave scoop or indentation along the front of it. And the size of it, I cannot overstate this. It appeared as large as the moon does in the night sky. But this was not the moon. This was not anywhere near space. This thing was hovering perhaps 500 feet above the treetops, right there, directly over our heads. It had no lights in the conventional sense, no blinking red or green signals, no bright beams. Instead, the entire surface of the object glowed. A dull, steady red-orange color like the surface of metal that has been heated to an extreme temperature and allowed to cool just slightly. It wasn't pulsing. It wasn't flickering. It was smooth and constant, almost hypnotic, with darker patches scattered across the underside of the craft. I remember staring at those darker spots for what felt like a very long time, my mind turning over the question, were those windows? Were those porthole openings? Were those viewing areas where someone or something might be looking back down at me? The thought that something might be watching me from inside, that thing was almost too much to hold on to. Dan, bless his heart, absolutely panicked. He started crying, stumbling and lurching around, accidentally catching Chris right in a very sensitive place with his knee in the chaos. Chris let out a groan and curled up, and Dan grabbed the flashlight. "Turn it off!" I remember shouting, my voice tight, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed for the flashlight, but my fingers simply were not cooperating. Nothing was working the way it was supposed to. My hands felt strange and clumsy. So I made a decision. I shoved the flashlight deep into my sleeping bag to smother the light, and then I looked back up, bracing myself, fully expecting some kind of reaction from whatever was up there. But there was none. The object did not change direction. It did not speed up. It did not descend toward us or do anything dramatic. It simply continued what it had been doing, drifting slowly and smoothly toward the southeast, silent and impossibly steady, like it was gliding on something we couldn't see or feel. And then, without any fanfare, without any flash or sound or spectacle, it slipped below the line of the treetops and was gone from our sight. The three of us scrambled off the trampoline and ran to the edge of the yard, craning our necks, looking desperately for any sign of where it had gone. But there was nothing, just the trees and the dark sky and the silence. And here is the part that haunts me the most, even now, all these years later. I have no memory of what happened next, not a single moment. It is as though the night simply stopped, right there at that edge of the yard. There is a blank space where the rest of that evening should be. I don't know if we talked. I don't know if we screamed or cried or laughed or simply stared at each other in silence. If you have ever been under general anesthesia, the kind they give you before a surgery, you will understand exactly what I mean. One moment you are there, fully conscious, fully present, talking and thinking and aware. And then without any sensation of transition, without any gradual fade, you are simply gone. And the next thing you know, you are somewhere else entirely, and time has passed that you cannot account for. That is exactly what it was like. The next thing I remember is the following morning. Sunlight in my eyes, birds in the yard, a completely ordinary morning, and we never talked about it. Not that day, not the next week, not ever. Somehow, without any agreement between us, we all just didn't. After that summer, the three of us drifted apart in ways that were painful and permanent. Dan and Chris's parents divorced. Both boys fell into very difficult times over the years, struggles with drugs, trouble with the law, time in juvenile detention. We lost touch entirely, and I have not seen either of them since. But I still wish I could, because I remember that night with complete clarity. I remember every detail of what I saw, and I have always wondered, do they carry it the same way I do? Would they tell the same story? That night changed me in a fundamental way. I became a photographer, specifically a night photographer. I have spent nearly 30 years pointing my camera at the sky, capturing stars and satellites and clouds lit from below by the silver glow of the moon. I have taken thousands upon thousands of photographs of the night sky. And in all of that time, in all of those thousands of hours under the open dark, I have never once seen anything above me that I could not identify and explain. And I think about that a lot. I think about what it means, and I wonder very quietly if I will ever see whatever that thing was again. If you are enjoying this already, please go ahead and like this video and share it with someone you think would love these stories. And if something similar has ever happened to you, a night that changed you, something in the sky you could never explain, please leave your story in the comments. We would all genuinely love to read it. Our next story takes us back even further, to the mid-1980s, to a cold and quiet winter night that left a lasting mark on a child who was simply doing what children do best, sitting outside in the snow and staring up at the stars. Picture it for a moment, a winter evening. The air is cold and absolutely still, no wind at all. The world is quiet in that particular deep way that only happens on certain winter nights when the cold seems to press down on everything and the usual sounds of cars and neighbors and distant activity are all absent. Just silence and cold and the dark. I was sitting in a snowbank right beside our house, doing what I usually did on clear nights, staring up at the sky, watching the stars. It was something I did often, something that brought me a real, genuine sense of peace. There were no cars on the road, no planes overhead, no sound of any kind, just me and the winter darkness and the stars above. And then something started to happen that I did not have any way to make sense of. The stars started to disappear. Not fading gradually the way stars do when clouds move in slowly from the horizon, not dimming softly. Whole sections of the sky were simply going dark, one patch at a time, as though something was erasing them. At first, the instinct was to assume clouds, but then I looked more carefully at the edges of these darkening patches and I stopped breathing for a moment, because the edges were wrong. They were too sharp, too straight, too defined. Clouds have soft, irregular, shifting edges. These edges were clean and geometric. And in that moment, I understood what I was looking at. I was looking at the underside of an enormous triangular craft moving slowly and silently just above the treetops. The only reason I could see it at all was because of what it was doing to the stars behind it, blocking them out, leaving these sharp-edged holes of darkness in the sky as it passed overhead. It had no lights. It made no sound whatsoever. It was simply this vast, pitch-black shape, drifting slowly and steadily against whatever light wind existed that night. The size of it was staggering. It was easily as large as my entire neighborhood. The whole neighborhood, every house, every yard, every street would have fit beneath it with room to spare. As it passed directly over me, I could make out faint reflections running along its leading edge, the kind of dim reflection you get when brushed metal catches just a tiny bit of ambient light from the streets and houses below. Not glowing, not illuminated, just catching the faintest traces of the world beneath it. And then there was the feeling. The air itself felt different. There was a change in pressure, subtle but unmistakable, like the feeling you get in your ears when an elevator drops too quickly, or when a storm system moves in very suddenly. Something physical was happening in the air around me, and my body was registering it even though I couldn't fully name what it was. I sat completely frozen in that snowbank, watching it drift steadily toward the mountains in the far distance. And then, just before it disappeared over the tree line, I felt something that I still struggle to describe properly. A low vibration, deep and resonant, not something I heard so much as something I felt inside my chest, the way you feel the bass from a powerful sound system in your sternum and your ribcage. Not a sound, a sensation. A sub-bass hum that you register with your body more than with your ears. And then suddenly everything returned to normal. The stars reappeared, blinking back into existence one by one across the night sky. The pressure eased, the vibration faded, and moments later I heard my mother's voice calling me in for dinner as though the world had simply continued on as if nothing had happened. I never told her. I never told anyone, not for a long time. I don't believe anyone else in the neighborhood noticed it that night, though I have often wondered. Years later, when I finally began looking into it, I discovered that triangular silent craft sightings were reported by many other people during that same general period. It has come to be called the Black Triangle Wave, a documented pattern of sightings across multiple regions during those years. But I knew nothing about that back then. I was just a kid, sitting in the snow, watching the stars vanish behind something that should not have been possible. The following story was shared by someone about their father, and they told us it still frightens them, even now, every time they think about it. To understand this story, you need to picture the setting. A small, quiet house situated near a river, with dense woodland stretching out behind the property. The kind of place where on a still night, the only sounds are the faint movement of water and whatever creatures are moving through the trees. The property sits on the edge of that wilderness, civilization on one side, deep, dark forest on the other. One night around midnight, this person's father was sitting outside on his patio in a chair positioned right at the edge of his property. The night was perfectly still. No wind, no clouds at all. The tree line at the far end of the yard looked like a solid black wall against the starry sky above, the kind of darkness that feels almost physical. He was sitting there quietly, smoking a cigarette, looking up at the stars. Just a man alone with the night and his thoughts. And then something happened in the sky above him. An intense light streaked downward at an angle. He didn't catch it immediately, not until it cleared the overhang of the roof behind him. He described it as looking like a miniature comet. A bright, baseball-sized orb of brilliant white light with a tail roughly a foot long trailing behind it. The tail was pure white near the orb itself, then faded gradually to a yellowish glow at its farthest tip. The whole thing moved with an unnatural, breathtaking speed, and yet it made absolutely no sound. Not a whisper, not a rush of air. Just this silent, blazing streak of light dropping from the sky toward the earth. In less than a second, less time than it takes to draw a breath, it slammed into the ground directly in front of him, and then it was gone. No explosion, no flash of secondary light, no sound of impact, no burning mark on the ground, nothing. Just a blinding streak of white light that simply ceased to exist the moment it made contact with the earth. He was so shaken that he immediately got up, flicked on his lighter, and knelt down on the driveway to examine the spot where it had hit. But there was nothing to see. Just the same dark asphalt of the driveway, just the familiar wall of trees behind it, just the normal, unbroken darkness of a quiet night. But he could not shake the feeling, a deep, instinctive, bone-level feeling that something was out there in those trees, something watching. The next morning he went back to look in the daylight, and this time there was something. A faint, shimmering spiral on the surface of the blacktop, right where the light had landed. It looked like a snail trail, but thinner, finer, as though it were very faintly glowing in the sunlight. The spiral was approximately the same size as the glowing orb had been, and it stayed there for several days, visible to anyone who looked closely enough, before it finally faded and disappeared completely. The person sharing this story says they don't know what it was, but their father swears on every word of it. And here is the thing, this person has had their own strange experiences, too. One afternoon, they watched approximately 20 objects drifting overhead through the woods above them. The objects were tic-tac-shaped, smooth, pale, elongated ovals, moving in a way that reminded them of watching amoebas under a microscope. Fluid, liquid smooth. Silently weaving around each other with an impossible, effortless grace. And after just a few seconds, they simply faded out of existence, like candles being snuffed one by one until the sky was empty and ordinary again. Nobody believes either of them, and they say, honestly, they don't blame anyone for being skeptical. But there is something about seeing things you cannot explain, especially when they appear near the woods, near the edge of something wild and dark and unknowable. That makes the world feel far less empty and far less familiar than you ever imagined it was. Our next story comes from a traveler, someone who was moving through one of the most historically ancient and storied regions on Earth, near the border between Samarkand and the Tajik border region of Uzbekistan, on a stretch of old road that runs near what was once the Great Silk Road trade route. This happened between 2 and 4 in the morning. The narrator and a friend of theirs, both foreign medical students studying in Uzbekistan at the time, had decided to take a late-night walk. The weather was calm and cool and pleasant, and they were walking along an isolated road that forms a square-shaped loop. During daylight hours, the area sees some foot traffic from travelers passing through. But at that hour of the night, it was completely, utterly deserted. Open fields stretched away on either side of the road. There were patches of grass here and there, and beyond that, just the dark. As they walked, they began to notice something that already felt a little off. Scattered along the empty road were somewhere between 5 and 10 parked vehicles, cars and vans, positioned seemingly at random, not lined up, not clustered together in a lot or near a building, just placed here and there seemingly at random along the otherwise empty road. There were no houses nearby, no shops, no signs of any gathering or event, no visible people anywhere. Just these vehicles, sitting silently in the dim ambient light of the night sky, with no apparent explanation for why they were there. At the far end of the road, a single cow was grazing quietly on a small patch of grass. That was the only living thing they could see. Just the cow and the parked vehicles and the silence and the open darkness around them. And then the truly strange part began. As they continued walking, both of them noticed a light appear roughly 10 to 20 meters ahead of them on the road. It was floating just above the surface of the ground, maybe 1 meter up, about the height of someone's knee. At first it appeared to be a single bright white light, blinking steadily. Just one point of light, rhythmic and calm. But then, within seconds, it separated. It split into 3 equally spaced points, forming a perfect triangle shape. The 3 lights evenly distributed and completely symmetrical. And then this triangle of lights began to move, slowly, smoothly, in a perfectly straight horizontal line directly ahead of them along the road, as if whatever it was attached to was gliding forward at a calm, measured pace. The speed was roughly equivalent to a person walking. The movement was completely smooth, fluid, effortless, and utterly silent. Not a sound, not a hum, not a whisper of wind or vibration. Just 3 blinking lights, perfectly triangulated, drifting along a dark border road in the middle of the night. Both of them stood completely still, watching. The lights remained visible for approximately 10 seconds, continuing their smooth forward motion, blinking all the while in the same steady rhythm. And then instantly they were gone, not fading, not dimming, not moving off into the distance. They simply ceased. One moment present, the next moment completely, absolutely absent. The 2 friends looked at each other and confirmed immediately, without any prompting, that they had each seen the same thing. The same 3 lights, the same triangle shape, the same smooth movement. It was not a personal illusion. It was not a camera artifact or a trick of the atmosphere. Whatever had been there was physically present in the space in front of them. After it was gone, the silence around them felt heavier than before. And those parked vehicles suddenly seemed even more out of place, more sinister somehow, sitting there in the dark with no lights and no occupants, no explanation for their presence on that empty road. Later, when the narrator got back and began searching online for any explanation for what they had seen, they came across something interesting. References to Central Asian folklore, specifically stories tied to the ancient Silk Road trade routes that described spirit lights and glowing entities appearing to travelers on isolated roads at night. According to several sources, these stories had been passed down for generations. A single glowing orb, multiple lights forming shapes. Travelers across centuries and cultures had reported seeing them. In some versions of the tradition, the lights were believed to be protective spirits, guiding those who were lost. In others, they were described as tricksters, entities that would lure the unwary away from the road and into danger. Whether what they saw was a rare atmospheric or electrical phenomenon, something man-made but unidentified, or something connected to those ancient legends of the Silk Road, they cannot say. But the image of three perfectly spaced blinking lights, floating just above the ground, drifting silently along a deserted border road in the deep of the night, is one that is permanently burned into their memory. And they would very much like to know if anyone else has ever seen anything like it. Have you ever seen something in the sky that you simply could not explain? Something you've carried with you for years? Tell us in the comments right now. We read every single one, and your story matters. Our next narrator tells us that throughout their life, they have seen lights in the sky that they have always described as UFOs. Not casually, not carelessly, but because they have genuinely taken the time to compare what they have seen against every conventional explanation they can think of. Satellites, aircraft, drones, weather balloons, they know what those look like, they know how they move, and they know with quiet certainty that what they have seen over the years is none of those things. There was a period, one particular winter a good many years ago now, lasting about a month, during which they would see unidentifiable lights and objects in the sky almost every week. But the sighting they choose to share with us tonight happened much more recently, right outside the window of their own bedroom, in a small town about 2 hours from Toronto, where the neighborhood edges up against open fields and a wide, uncluttered sky. On this particular night, they were sitting at their writing desk, working on one of their novels, as they often do late at night. The desk sits right beside the window. The curtains are usually open because they are on the second floor and it does not concern them. Around midnight, they finished for the night, shut down the laptop, and stood up from their chair. As they turned toward the window to switch off the lamp beside their desk, the lamp beside the bed still glowing softly across the room, they found themselves looking out into the dark sky. And there it was. A big, solid red light, sitting absolutely still in the sky just to the right of the neighbor's house next door. It did not immediately register as unusual. Their first thought was simply airplane. But as they stood there watching it, that explanation quickly fell apart because it was not moving at all. It was completely stationary, hanging there in the same spot in the sky. And there were no blinking lights, the kind that all aircraft are required to display. Just one large, steady, motionless red light sitting silently in the night sky above their quiet town. An important note: yes, there is a radio tower in the area, but it is about a mile away in the completely opposite direction, and there was nothing else in the vicinity that could account for what they were seeing. They made a decision. They were not going to let this one pass them by in 15 seconds. They went downstairs, went out to their car, and retrieved their binoculars. Even from outside, without any optical aid, the light was still there, still stationary, still red, still silent. They lifted the binoculars to their eyes and worked to bring the light into focus. Through the glass, they could just barely make out a shape. A diamond. The light appeared to belong to something shaped like a diamond, hanging silently in the sky. No sound, no movement, no change of any kind. They watched it for well over 20 minutes before the tiredness finally became too much. They went inside, went through their bedtime routine, and just before getting into bed, looked out one final time. It was still there. It had been there for well over an hour at that point. And in the morning, when they looked out again, it was gone. Gone during the night at some point without any drama or announcement. Just absent. And they are still left with the question they cannot answer. What in the world was that? The next story involves a mother, a very particular kind of mother. Religious, practical, no nonsense. Someone who grew up in the Brethren faith, a very old and conservative form of worship. Someone you would not expect to have an alien encounter story. And yet, this narrator's mother had always had a quiet fascination with the subject. She had grown up watching alien and UFO programs whenever she could catch them. She had always believed, in her own way, that something was out there. Perhaps influenced by her father, who had driven long routes as a trucker and served in the military, and who may have seen things in those years that he never quite put into words. One autumn night, this mother was driving home through the Appalachian Mountains in western North Carolina, coming back from a festival in eastern Tennessee. The leaves had been falling for a few weeks by then, and the trees along the mountain road were bare enough that you could see through them to the open sky. Her daughter and her own mother, the narrator's sister and grandmother, were passengers in the car. She spotted what at first looked like a cluster of 3 to 5 lights arranged in a circular pattern. They were getting closer. Her daughter noticed, her mother noticed. All 3 women in that car were now watching the same thing moving through the sky above the mountain road. And then it was behind them, low, very low to the ground, trailing the car. She opened the sunroof. She opened her window, and there was no sound, none at all. Whatever this thing was, it was following her car in complete silence. And then came the detail that truly frightened her. Something that she described as an opaque white column appeared on the road behind the car. And it stayed. The distance between that white column and the rear of her car did not change. It was keeping pace with her, matching her speed exactly, silently, effortlessly, following her through those mountain curves. She went from curious to terrified in the span of a breath. She pressed the accelerator down hard and drove as fast as those mountain roads would safely allow. The whole incident, from the first sighting of the lights to the moment the white column finally fell away, lasted less than a minute. And then, as suddenly as it had all begun, it was simply gone. When she got home that night, her child expected excitement, breathless enthusiasm, the joy of finally having seen the thing she had always wanted to see. But that is not what greeted them. Their mother was shaken, pale, unable to settle. She had always wanted to see a UFO, and now she had, and what she felt was not wonder. It was something closer to terror. She told them she could not sleep properly for days afterward. That was more than 10 years ago now, and she no longer talks about aliens and UFOs with anything like the same enthusiasm she once had. That night in the mountains cured whatever casual curiosity she had carried with her for decades. But here is the thing, she was not the only one who saw it. She later remembered that she had a friend who lived in the area where it happened. She called him, and he told her that the security camera on his garage had captured the lights on film from that very night. And it was not just the 2 of them. The lights had been seen by multiple other people in the area, enough that the sighting was reported on the local news out of Johnson City, Tennessee. The story exists. The footage exists. The witnesses exist. By the time the narrator tried to find the original report, too much time had passed and they came up empty. But none of that changes what happened on that mountain road. Now, we travel to rural North Louisiana, the late 1980s, maybe the very earliest 1990s, a landscape of vast, flat fields stretching in every direction. Cotton, cattle, soybeans, the kind of open, rural countryside where the sky feels enormous and the nearest town is always farther away than you remember. A child, our narrator, is in the car with their mother and sister. They are driving to church on a late afternoon. They take a curve around a stand of trees, and there it is, off to the left, hovering over one of those big open fields. Something large, something burning red and orange and brilliant, not shaped like any craft they had ever imagined. Shaped instead like a flame, like the flame that rises from a lighter. Long and tapered, coming to a point at both the top and the bottom. Vivid and bright as actual fire, but floating, hovering, utterly still and utterly silent above the field. The children in the car started screaming. They were convinced, with the total certainty of children raised in a religious household, that they were witnessing the second coming of Christ. The mother, in a moment of parental instinct that makes the narrator laugh now, years later, told them it was a rocket, which was not remotely plausible, given that there were absolutely no rocket launch sites anywhere near rural North Louisiana. But they were children, and children believed their mothers, and so they accepted it and settled down. They watched the object floating there, hovering, silent and fiery, until the road took them out of sight of it. Whether it was moving very slowly or standing completely still, they could not be certain because they themselves were in a moving car. Either way, it gave no impression of urgency. It was simply there, above the field, doing whatever it was doing. For decades, the memory faded. Life moved on. It became one of those things you half remember from childhood and never quite think through properly. Until the day the narrator happened to see an interview, or perhaps a documentary, featuring Bob Lazar, the man who claimed to have worked on recovered alien craft. In that interview, Lazar described how certain flying discs would orient themselves vertically, tilting upright, with the points directed up and down, in order to travel at certain speeds. And that description brought everything back. But that was not the strangest part of the story, because shortly after that sighting, in the field, things began to change for this child. They started having night terrors. A deep fear of being alone in their room after dark settled in and would not leave. They began sleepwalking, not mild, gentle sleepwalking, but serious episodes. They would wake up in different rooms of the house. They would wake up outside. On one particularly terrifying occasion, they woke up in what appeared to be a completely dark room with no light source of any kind and no sense of where they were. They had to feel their way along the walls in total blackness, heart pounding, trying to find a door, trying to find any way out. And then they blacked out again, with no explanation, no memory of how they had gotten there or how they left. There were periods of missing time as well, gaps in memory they could not account for. And then the nosebleeds started. Serious, almost daily nosebleeds that were severe enough to become genuinely alarming, waking up in the night to find their pillow soaked with blood, their face covered. It got bad enough that a doctor's visit was required. And then there were the visits, something or someone that the narrator as a child came to call the White Triangle Lady. She came many times. She communicated not through words but through images, feelings, energy, and a kind of directed motion, a language that bypassed language entirely. There was a feeling that she was asking something, offering something, a sense of invitation, of recruitment, of a question being put to this child that they were not old enough to fully understand. The narrator is careful to say that these experiences did not feel like any dream state they had ever had before or since. They were different in a way that is difficult to articulate, more vivid, more immediate, almost psychedelic in their intensity, and yet there was something in them that felt warm, almost maternal, abstract beyond anything they had ever encountered, hard to put into words even now. The experiences were real, they carry them still. This next account comes from Odessa, Texas. The narrator was outdoors one evening, watching the sky as the sun moved toward the horizon when they noticed two unusual points of light. What made them unusual was this. As the sun set and the earth rotated, the stars visible in the sky gradually shift position. That is the nature of our rotating planet. But these 2 points of light were not shifting. They stayed in exactly the same position in the sky as time passed, which should not have been possible for actual stars. So out came the binoculars and then the telescope. Through the telescope, the difference became unmistakable. A real star, when viewed through a telescope, appears as a single bright dot, a tiny, intense point of shining light. But each of these two objects appeared as 3 separate dots arranged in a triangular formation, not bright, not shiny, just 3 quiet, steady points of dim light, perfectly triangulated, sitting unmoving in the sky. Without the telescope, the triangular structure was invisible. They simply looked like ordinary stars. With it, the truth of their shape became apparent. They did not move, and eventually both of them simply faded out gradually, slowly, until they were gone. Between 1 and 7 days after this sighting, in the hours between 3 and 3:30 in the morning, something came to hover directly above the family's house. Our narrator was asleep at the time. Their brother knocked on their bedroom door, woke them up, and told them something was above the house. The brother had seen a light that was illuminating the entire backyard, flooding it with brightness. He had also felt a distinct sensation of pressure and deep bass vibration. Their mother had also woken up, pulled from sleep by the same feeling and by the same light. This is significant. If their mother was voluntarily awake at 3:30 in the morning, something real had happened to rouse her. She had caught a glimpse of something else, too, part of a large, round shadow cast on the backyard fence. The logic of it was simple. If the moon is out and something enormous is hovering directly overhead, that object will cast a shadow on whatever is below. And then the object began to move. The moment it did, the light switched off. The bass stopped. The pressure in the air released, and then it was gone. Their brother and mother told them what had happened, perhaps 10 or 15 minutes later. And then the narrator, by their own admission, went back to sleep, which, as they note with a touch of self-awareness, seems a little out of character. They are naturally nocturnal. They had just been told a UFO had been hovering over the house, and they went back to sleep. They called the relevant aviation authority the following morning to confirm whether any aircraft had been scheduled to fly over that airspace at that time. None had. When they woke up fully later that morning, they found something on their right hand. 3 small, perfectly circular marks arranged in a triangular pattern on the middle finger and knuckle. They looked like clean, precise needle punctures, small round scabs, evenly spaced, precise in their geometry. They healed and disappeared after about a week. But for the next 5 years, whenever hot water touched that area of their hand, there would be a brief, sharp sting. As though something remained there beneath the surface that the water activated. The sensitivity eventually faded years later, but it was there. From Houston now, a different kind of experience, but one the narrator believes may be connected. They were at home one day when they heard a voice. Clearly, unmistakably, a voice speaking directly into their right ear only. A single word, "Hey," starting quiet and growing louder. Child, as children do, was not paying close attention. They were playing with their toys on the floor. And then a bright blue light appeared outside the window. Not a car light, not a street light. A light descending from the sky. The child immediately called their grandmother over to look, and she saw it too. The child tried to get her to record it on her phone, but as grandmothers sometimes do with technology, she struggled with the camera function and was unable to get it working in time. As they watched, the child thought it through with the clear, uncomplicated logic of a young mind. It could not be the northern lights. Thailand is nowhere near far enough north for that. It could not be a car's headlights. The light was coming from above. The light appeared as a bright, translucent vertical strip, broadly similar in form to an aurora but intensely blue, and it reached all the way from the sky down to the ground. It was vivid. Girl of about 8 or 9 and a teenager. The narrator gave the little girl a Scooby-Doo shirt they happened to have because she mentioned she liked the show. A small, simple kindness. But the family apparently found it strange, notable in a way the narrator did not understand at the time. They stayed for several weeks, mostly in their tent, going inside only when specifically invited. On the very first night, while talking with the grandmother inside the house, the narrator noticed the grandfather was absent. They asked where he was, and the grandmother answered, simply, directly, without any build-up or drama, that he had gone for a walk to meet the UFO. Just like that. The narrator sat with that for a moment, genuinely not sure what to do with it. And over the following days and weeks, they learned more. The young girl of 8 or 9 was having night terrors, repeatedly, consistently. She would describe small gray figures Real reason, the family had accused the narrator of paying too much attention to the little girl. That was why they had been asked to go. The narrator was devastated, furious. The accusation was false and they deny it entirely. But they also wonder, was that accusation genuinely what the family believed? Or were they simply looking for a reason to send this person away because they had let too much slip? Because this outsider had seen and heard more than they should have? The gray figures at the foot of the child's bed. The grandfather's walks to meet the UFO. The internal aerospace television channel. The small footsteps past the tent in the early morning hours. Maybe they were asked to leave because they simply knew too much. Like this video if these stories are keeping you gripped, and share it with someone who loves a good unexplained mystery. Your support helps this channel keep bringing you stories like these every single week. Proportion but not human, not quite. No genitalia. Just that smooth, gleaming, impossibly white body standing perfectly still, staring into the dark of the woods. The narrator stood there, barely breathing, pressed against the corner of their own house. And then the creature turned its head. Not its body, just its head, snapping cleanly and suddenly in their direction and fixing them with a direct, unmistakable stare. The only thought they had was run. They ran into the house, slammed the door, locked it, and stood there waiting, heart slamming, waiting for whatever that thing was to come through the door after them. It did not, but the terror of that moment, the absolute primal animal terror, has never fully left them. 6 to 7 feet tall, glowing pale white, naked, smooth, standing in a fenced backyard staring at the woods at nearly 3 in the morning. The narrator says the closest visual reference they can find anywhere. Asked if he would ever see them again. Their answer came the same way: we will let ourselves be known. And then there was a flash of light, and the 3 beings vanished, collapsing, contracting into a single small cube of light. And then the cube itself grew smaller and smaller until it too was gone. The narrator believed their father without question. They were 10. Of course they did. And when they told the story at a birthday party when they were 12, they were met with cruel laughter and the declaration that their father was delusional. They did not share the story again for years. But it hurt not just because children can be thoughtless and unkind, but because their father is one of the most grounded, stable, sensible people they have ever known. The idea of calling him delusional was simply wrong. And here is the thing, he was not the only witness. The younger of his brothers, the narrator's uncle, had also been woken. A GoPro was set up on a tripod. A phone was taking photographs. They were doing the thing you do in a place like that, just lying back and letting the sky be magnificent. And then the wife pointed to a single small light, moving slowly across the sky, the way satellites do. The kind of thing you see regularly on a clear night and recognize immediately. Except this one began to change. As they watched, the single light split into two, then three arranged in a triangle, and then it kept expanding slowly, methodically, until there were approximately 7 lights forming a larger triangular pattern. And then the truly strange thing happened. The section of sky visible within that triangle, the stars, the depth, the background, appeared to freeze, like a screenshot, like a still frame captured from a moving film. That section of sky was locked, static, immobile. And as the triangle moved, that frozen section of sky moved with it, WH. Their friends turned all the lights on, went to check. No footprints in the thick dust on the porch. None in the soft mud around the porch. Their friends had heard nothing and seen nothing during any part of the evening's events. The last piece of this story came about a month later, back home in their own kitchen making dinner. The wife looked up and saw an owl sitting on the garden fence, staring fixedly into the house at them. The narrator has since learned about the documented connection between owl sightings and reports of UAP encounters and abduction experiences. Whether that owl was a coincidence or something else, they cannot say. But it unsettled his wife deeply. She no longer enjoys looking at the stars. The narrator, on the other hand, is still fascinated, still watching, still curious. In the mountains, on a clear night with no light pollution, on the 11th of July, 2019, a woman and her then-boyfriend, now her husband, were camping at altitude and relaxing beneath what should have been a straightforwardly beautiful sky. The stars began behaving strangely. They appeared to zigzag, to move upward, to weave toward and away from each other in flowing circular patterns, almost as though they were playing. The couple watched this for a full 2 to 3 hours, unable to look away. And then through a natural opening between two mountain peaks, a bright light appeared. Very bright, white-yellow, moving toward them, moving directly toward them, growing larger as it came. The husband, described as a man not easily frightened, panicked. He grabbed her, they both scrambled into the tent, both screaming. Just before the tent flap closed, she caught a glimpse of the shape above them, a diamond, extremely bright. And then nothing, no light came through the tent fabric. No sound, no vibration, no noise of any kind, just sudden, total calm. And a moment later, or what felt like a moment, they were both back outside, lying quietly, watching the stars again. Calm, peaceful, as though nothing had happened. As though the fear and the scramble and the screaming were something from a different evening. They watched the stars until sunrise, undisturbed, serene. Since then, the memory has a strange quality to it. When she tries to talk about it or type it out, as she does here, it feels, in some impossible-to-explain way, like she is making it up. Like she is describing something that did not really happen. Her husband feels the same. The further back they reach into the memory, the less solid it becomes. Not faded with time the way ordinary memories fade, different from that. Gone in a particular, structured way. She cannot explain it. She cannot explain any of it. And she wants to know if anyone else has ever felt that particular sensation. The experience of remembering something real, something you know happened, that your own mind keeps insisting was not real. From Miami, Florida, around 2015, a studio apartment, a person who is awake, not asleep, not even tired, just lying in bed trying to force themselves towards sleep. They had the covers over their head for about 15 minutes, still completely awake. And then they had a feeling, a mental intuition, no physical sensation, but something certain and immediate. Something is behind me. They took the covers off, turned their head, and there, approximately 6 inches from their face, was a figure. Bluish, translucent, hovering over them, its head level with their head. 6 white eyes with no pupils, a head shape that was not recognizably human, though they struggle now to remember the exact form of it. The whole thing had a quality they later compared to Silver Surfer, that pale, metallic, translucent blue quality. They stared at it stared at them. This lasted about a second and a half. And then, as the narrator began to sit up as the first movement happened, the figure changed. It shifted. It transformed before their eyes into something that looked like the narrator themselves. Same general form, same face, but bluish, transparent, luminescent. They got up, went toward it, and the moment they moved with clear intention, the figure glided toward the hallway. They followed, running after it. It looked back at them once as it moved, and then it dispersed, passed through the door and came apart on the other side and was gone. They were not afraid, they were curious. They wanted to know what it was and why it had come. They turned on every light in the apartment and spent the next 10 minutes talking to themselves, earnestly, insistently, repeating, "Remember, you were not asleep. You were not tired. You were fully awake. You know what you saw." They have told very few people. Their girlfriend at the time, recently their mother for the first time. And their mother responded by telling them that when she was 5 years old, she saw man made of static, made of the kind of noise that used to appear on television screens when there was no signal. The narrator says, "I have no choice but to believe her, because she has no reason to make that up, and because I know what I saw." They close with something that feels important. If this universe is so incomprehensibly large that our entire world is perhaps no more significant than a single atom within some vast, unknowable structure of matter and energy, then it would be the height of arrogance to believe we are the only intelligent life within it. The question is not whether other intelligence exists. The question is what happens when it finds us. And that, dear friends, brings us to the end of tonight's extraordinary collection. Hey everyone, it's Mort here, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for spending your evening with me and with these remarkable stories. I do genuinely hope you have enjoyed tonight's gathering of UFO and alien experiences. Given everything that has been coming to light in recent years, the congressional hearings, the declassified reports, the credible witnesses coming forward, I think it feels a little less like imagination and a little more like something we are collectively, slowly beginning to reckon with. I have always believed that something is out there. Whether or not it has reached our shores in any meaningful way, well, perhaps none of us will know that with certainty in our lifetimes, but the stories keep coming. And they keep sounding remarkably similar, across countries and decades and cultures, told by people who have nothing to gain and sometimes quite a lot to lose by sharing them. If you enjoyed tonight's video, please drop a like and leave a comment. Every single one of them truly means the world to me and helps this channel keep going. And tomorrow night, I am very much looking forward to this. We are going to be spending some time with my good old friend Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot stories are coming, and I think you are going to love them. What do you think about everything we heard tonight? Which story stayed with you the most? Write your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a new night of stories. One final and very warm thank you to all of my channel members and patrons, whose names you can see on screen right now. Your support makes all of this possible, and I am more grateful than I can properly say. And if you would like a birthday shout-out of your own, or if you would like to suggest a topic for a future night, join up and let me know. The door is always open. That is everything from me tonight. Stay warm, stay curious, stay wonderful, and I will see you tomorrow night with Bigfoot. Good night, everyone. Good night.